I'd like to have a conversation with you guys and see what your thoughts are on this, because I think this is really important. The question I have is, are you mentally prepared for what's about to happen? We've seen a lot of different things going on in the world lately. It would seem as though society is just slowly falling down the steps, and there's nothing much we can do about stopping it. And when we report on things like food shortages and the looming food shortages that are happening as we speak, that haven't really even hit the marketplace, I think a lot of people think it's fear-mongering. They think, we're putting fear out there. The reality is we're talking about the market, we're talking about what's happening, and we're helping people be prepared. But there's a big difference, I think, between being prepared, having resources at your fingertips, and actually being mentally prepared for what's coming. Because if you're not mentally prepared, it doesn't matter how prepared you are, things could fall apart for you. And so I wanted to have a conversation with you guys about what you're doing to be mentally prepared for the future. What are you doing to mentally prepare your kids for the future? I mean, that's been a big thing as well. When we looked at lockdowns during the pandemic, a lot of the psychological impact wasn't just on adults, wasn't just on families in general, but they were primarily on children. Children not being able to go to school, not being able to socialize. And so what are you doing to help prepare your kids for a future that might be different than what they're used to? So let's talk about what you can do to mentally prepare, because like I said, it doesn't matter how many resources you have at your fingertips. If you're not conditioning your mind to think through things, to be able to react without getting stressed out, you're going to have mistakes, you're going to fail at it ultimately. I mean, our greatest resource is our ability to think through things. That's why people meditate. That's why people pray. A lot of people think that prayer is some sort of ritual, but what it actually is it's a conditioning between your thought and listening for right ideas. One of the things I find interesting that nobody talks about, we're all worried about an EMP potential with, nuclear fallout from Russia. But there's a much larger EMP threat, one that there's nothing we can do about. It wouldn't matter if there was a war or not. That is an EMP emitted from the sun. These electromagnetic pulse events actually do happen in nature. And in fact, when President Trump was in office, he ordered a report to be done to see what would happen with the impacts of such an event. And he invested money into our infrastructure to help shore up our infrastructure and prepare it for such an electromagnetic pulse event. And these events would be catastrophic on their magnitude and scale. Now, if you look at a nuclear warhead going off in the atmosphere and creating an EMP, that would be more regionalized than something that is coming out of a solar flare. However, when you see these things like, the Satan II from Russia that can shoot off like 10 nuclear warheads, then you could have a nationwide EMP event as well. So these are things to think through. But Trump's report it just showed how detrimental it could be to society in the event that something like this happened, that the power went out, things didn't work. How would people react? And what I found interesting about the report was a lot of the loss of human life occurred fairly quickly, and it occurred from the reactions of people amongst people. And so you need to have a plan in place that allows you to separate from that and think on your own. That plan is often how you've conditioned your thought, how you're going to react in different circumstances, because you don't know what those circumstances are going to be. Are you going to be, if something like that happens, are you going to be in a car somewhere? Are you going to be at your office somewhere? I mean, these are all things that different scenarios could play out for you, and you need to have conditioned yourself to think through them. And not just EMPs, when you look at food shortages and you look at economic fallout. I mean, we are on the brink of financial destruction right now. We've had runaway inflation, which they're finally admitting to, that the inflation is here. Now they're saying that we're going to continue to see inflation through 2023. And so then you have economic fallout from that. And how are you mentally going to get through those times? They can be very stressful. A lot of times stress can cloud our judgment, when really the answers could be a lot simpler. One of the things that we do with our kids to kind of condition them, and it's not necessarily, we didn't start doing this to condition them, but I think it's a great exercise for them is, as the sun goes down, I would say, you know, a couple times a month, we will have all electronics in the house just turned off. And so as the sun goes down and the light starts to dim from the outside light, that's all that we have in the house other than something simple like candles. And what you'll find from doing this type of exercise, and I think that this type of exercise could also help in isolation situations like we had with COVID, especially with children, is they have to find a way to be creative under candlelight. They have to find a way to be creative without having communications, without having electronics. And it's also preparing them for the event that something like an EMP did happen. Well, how would they react in a situation without power? And what I have found is that the kids actually really enjoy it. They have a lot of fun with it. We end up playing a lot of family board games. We talk about things. They read books. And so they end up doing things that they normally wouldn't do. And so I feel like by doing that type of thing, when something happens, they're going to be more prepared for it. They're going to be used to it. They're going to be able to continue on with their lives without feeling a major loss of something. They're going to continue on with something that they've had fun doing. But one of the ways that I help our kids as well is finding the correct literature for them to read. For example, with our youngest, we're working in some of the Tuttle twins books because those help him think through some of the issues we face as an economy, issues we face as a society, help him understand, you know, how these systems work, how they work together. But for my 11-year-old or 12-year-old, I always get his age wrong, they grow up so quickly. I actually have gotten him a couple books. You might remember this author if you were born in the 80s, Gary Paulsen's The Hatchet. Now, Brian, the character in this book, Gary Paulsen actually came out with numerous other books in the late 80s, early 90s. I didn't read those because I had grown out of it by then, but he's basically created these books of a boy named Brian who gets stranded out in the wilderness, and he has to learn to survive. And he walks through the thought process that the boy goes through. He walks through the challenges that the boy goes through, and he shows how the boy kind of develops. And the books are actually designed to help train young men or women how to think through those situations, how to be self-aware, and how to put your mind to being a resource and help it problem solve. We're not trained that way now. When we send our kids to school, they're not teaching them to problem solve on that type of scale. They're just teaching them to work within a box, to work within a framework, because that's how our society works. And in fact, you and I aren't trained to think that way anymore. We're not trained to actually sit down and problem solve and troubleshoot and come up with solutions, understand the mechanics of how things work. These books that were written by Gary Paulsen for a young boy or girl are incredible books, and they offer a mental training, so to speak, of how to think through things. Now, as adults, you know, like I said, we haven't been trained that way. We've all gone through the public school system. We've been trained to think in boxes. We've been trained to, you know, specialize within a job. And so when things go wrong and they're outside of the norm for us, we have a hard time adjusting to that. And it doesn't matter how many books you have that'll teach you how to do something. If you're not trained to think through the process, it's going to be difficult even to put those practices to use, even put your resources to use. There is an author who contacted me and sent me a variety of books. I think these are incredible books. This author is kind of what I'd say is a Gary Paulsen for adults. And his name is Ron Foster. And what he does is he writes books. I've got a stack of them here. Oh, here they are. He's what you would call a fictional prepper writer or survivalist writer. He writes fiction novels based on situations, and they're real life situations. Some of his books I wouldn't say are so fictional anymore, actually. But he writes these books based on things that could happen, an EMP, or you know, it doesn't matter whatever the catastrophe is. He has a book and a storyline where this person has to go through the thought process, face these challenges, figure out solutions. And when you read these books, what it's doing is it's conditioning your mind, conditioning you to think about how you can actually take all of this knowledge that you've been building up, all of these resources that you've been building up, and put them to practical use. And you do that through reading about these characters. And these books are absolutely incredible. Some of them, like my wife here, I haven't had a chance to read through a lot of them. I've kind of read the synopsis on a lot of the books, and I've read a lot about Ron Foster and his writing style and the educational content within it. But you can see my wife has already marked a few pages in the Apocalyptic Apothecary. And so what he does here is, as he's explaining some of this stuff, he'll actually give some recipes, explain its practical uses for, toothpaste, stomach aches, that type of thing. He brings the fiction back into reality. It gives you resources that you can actually use as well. So these are just, if you're looking for an author that is more adult-oriented than somebody like Gary Paulsen, Ron Foster is a great author. He's well known for his writing. He's written a lot of these books. He sent us the Apocalyptic Apothecary, the Bugout Gardening Guide, and this will help walk you through some of the thought processes of what to grow, what grows best. What are you going to do if water goes out? A lot of the things that we try and grow don't grow very well with water. We've kind of learned over the past couple of years, as we've tried to plant areas before we could get water resources to them, what plants will naturally grow in our area versus which ones won't. Beets are one of the ones that do really well for us. Lettuces, if you plant them in the early spring. But the Bugout Gardening Guide will kind of walk you through how to find resources to grow things, what kind of plants you should be growing. He also sent us, and I requested this one, RV Travel Trailer Preppers Long-Term Survival Bug-Out Skills and Camping Guide. I have been curious about this myself because I feel like, depending on the situation, you may have to make yourself a little more mobile if you can, if you have the resources. And so what could you do in an RV to really prep? There's not a lot of space in there. He's got a book for it. I'm really not sure, Ron, why you sent this one to me. It's the Old Fart Survival Guide. I would say if you were born pre the Hatchet, 1980, what was that? 1986. Wait, I was too. If you were born, 70s, this is the book for you, right? So this is just full of information from trapping to bird hunting and a lot of DIY projects. I mean, it's really a book for everybody. I think he's just being funny with the title there, but there's some old skills in this book that would become extremely useful to anybody if resources became scarce. An old man and his axe. This is probably an adult version of the Hatchet. I haven't read it. The Longest Walk, that's about an EMP going off, how the guy gets home, what he goes through. Beyond the Burning Shore, another similar type catastrophic event where they have to figure out how to survive on a boat. So you've got all of these different scenarios, and as you read these books, what it's doing is it's conditioning your mind to kind of work through those things. Another thing we do in our family is we regularly camp out, even on our property. And when we do, we cook over a wood fire. We do these things because we're helping us learn, number one, what resources do we need in the event that this happens, and this is all we have to rely on. How difficult is this? Is there anything that would make it easier? We're also developing our skills. We're helping ourselves figure out how to do these things on the go. Camping is just a wonderful way of connecting with nature, but also, simplifying things. If you don't go glamping, simplifying things and learning how to do things, with just, a few tools in a backpack in a lot of cases. And like I said, you never know what the future unfolds. I know that we have a very uncertain future right now. We have a very uncertain future when it comes to food. We have a very uncertain future when it comes to nuclear EMPs. The threat of a solar EMP is increasing every day. A lot of people don't realize this, but there was an EMP over Africa that shut down radio communications for a short period of time earlier this year. The electromagnetic pulse emittance from the sun has gradually been increasing, and it's just a matter of time in the cycles of when something like that will impact Earth again. And it's based on what I have studied with solar cycles, it's right around the corner in the near future, next several years. But that's not guaranteed. Nobody can predict the future. I think that is important, just that predictions, we can only make educated guesses based on historical events and what has occurred. From making those educated opinions, from looking back, if you are an educated person, then you know that there's things happening that you need to be prepared for. And if you, regardless of what you've packed in your bug-out bag, whatever you have in the trunk of your car, if you're not mentally prepared and mentally conditioned to deal with those situations, you're going to falter. And I think that there are a lot of good authors out there like Ron Foster who have that's what they enjoy, thinking through these situations in detail and helping you understand what these people did. I don't know if you ever watched that movie with I can't remember the name of it. It was at The Edge. It's got Baldwin and Anthony Hopkins in it. Anthony Hopkins is basically this rich guy who is on this hunting trip with Baldwin, who works for him, is having an affair with his wife. There's a whole storyline behind it. But anyway, they get stranded out in the wilderness. And Anthony Hopkins is kind of a fan of these fiction survivalist novels, and he's read a ton of these books on how to survive in these situations. And in the entire movie, he's basically saving their lives and is able to get everybody back to safety, well, just the two of them back to safety, from all the different skills that he's learned from reading these books and thinking through it. Okay, this is how I make an arrow, and or a spear, and this is how I hunt a bear. And so the conditioning that he goes through from his hobby of reading these books ends up saving their lives. And I think that that's where you need to kind of have that same conditioning. And I'm sure there are a lot of different things that we could all do, and maybe you guys have suggestions down below of activities you can do to condition your mind, books you can do to condition your mind. There's all sorts of great ideas out there, and I think it's worth having a conversation here on a thread and just kind of figure out, how can we help each other condition our thoughts? Because we are, I consider you guys part of a community. I want you guys to do well, and I want us to share some of these ideas so that we can help each other in this conditioning process. And like I said, don't forget to condition your children and your other family members. They need that same conditioning as well. If they're going to be resourceful to you and your family, they need to have some sort of thought process that they've started to develop that allows them to think through these situations and have practical applications and react efficiently instead of just sporadically and spastically. I mean, that's really what we see happening in the world today, even with our own government. We see spastic reactions that end up having a cascading effect down the road. We've seen it with our economy, just the constant pumping of money into the economy to do a quick fix. The Federal Reserve, for as long as I've been following them, have just been reactionary to the markets. They're not able to think ahead. They're not able to think strategically. And I blame that a lot in part on our education system and the way that we have raised up the last couple generations. So put your ideas down below. I'd love to hear them. Some of them, if I think they're really good, maybe we can investigate and figure out, different ways that, we could help people from watching this YouTube channel start to think through these types of situations and be better prepared, better people in our community.